a number of ways, this would not be possible without your participation. This is really, really wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. But again, thank you for coming to the fourth big feature stakeholder meeting.
Fourth and last.
Yes.
Yes. At least for last year's work.
Yes.
Right. So I think we can go past that. Right. So the proposal that we put together over a year ago was talking about the need for quality samplings. And I'm not going to read you the entire bit from the proposal, but this is what we've built. And the idea is that you don't have to review everything, but what you can identify what transcriptions need closer attention. So that's kind of what's driven all of this work.
Yeah, so we put this proposal together with some ideas based on observing some of the things that Meredith and other people were doing. But since then, we've also had a couple of meetings with folks like Claire and Meredith and kind of done deep dives into their process, and that has been absolutely invaluable.
So we're also like, this is not baked, right? This is not set in stone yet. We still need your feedback and your thoughts on how this is going to work, if it's going to work for you, if it matches your existing kind of how you think about quality and reviews. And
then as you test it and try to use it,
yes,
in with real data, with real projects, we hope you'll come back and tell us what works and what doesn't, so that we can improve this.
And of the 4 features that we've worked on over the last year or so for CoSA, this is by far the most complicated, the most challenging to build and to get right. So we really, really, really do. When we ask for your feedback, we really do mean it. So why are we building this? We're building it because we're already doing this work. We're just not doing it in a really particularly efficient way. So our own experience running projects showed us that you should pay special attention to new transcribers, or maybe to transcribers who drop in and transcribe a single page. So that was one of the kind of cases that we identified as, hey, this is something that's worth reviewing and giving some attention to. We also know that Meredith, when she was working on, the very first kind of CoSA project or related project, was the World War I service card material. And she would export a spreadsheet of the transcriptions, and she would just kind of scan over it and look for anomalies, look for individual transcribers that she kind of knew maybe had some quality issues and needed a closer review. The Maryland State Archives was working on marriage certificates, vital records, right? And they had staff members dedicate hours of every week so that every single record was closely reviewed, because this was really, the quality was more important for that project than probably for any other project we've had on From the Page. So the new review dashboard and quality sampling feature makes all 3 of these approaches faster. We hope.
Right.
We think that
was our goal.
The goal.
Yes. So this is the new launching point for quality control, which is a new review tab at the collection level, right? So this shows you how many pages are in the collection total, how many have been transcribed, and how many need review. The new things that you'll see here are at the bottom, which are, which are new contributors, one-off contributions, and works review. So Sarah will talk about this in a minute.
And then we also have this center section, the quality sampling, which we'll spend most of the presentation talking about.
So one of the things we talked about at Best Practices Exchange with the Missouri State Archives was this exploration of dimensions of quality. So what things vary within a transcription project that influence the quality of the contributions? And can you kind of see patterns or see ways to divide the contributions that let you kind of isolate and focus on things that need particular attention? So the dimensions that we really wanted to focus on were the user, right? We're all kind of familiar with the idea that some people may be more careful or more skilled or just have better eyesight or better typing skills than others, but also the particular work, right? Particularly at the state level, you see documents that are coming in from counties, right, county clerk's offices and things that vary tremendously in terms of the legibility of handwriting, in terms of who is using handwriting versus who's using a typewriter. One thing that we saw with this Wisconsin Historical Society was an example of material that was entirely typewritten on a single typewriter that never had its keys cleaned. So every single typewritten letter was just kind of a blob. I mean, it was just kind of horrible, right? So we see that quality can vary on a work by work basis as well as a user by user basis.
And that work is the from the page concept of a work. It might be a pile of cards from a particular county, or marriage certificates from a particular year and subset of the alphabet, things like that.
Right. The final dimension that is important is time, right? From our own experience, and I'm sure from yours as well, you know that the first time that you start working with a given kind of material, doing a particular kind of task, you're new to it, you're maybe not that great at it, and you improve over time, right? So looking at new contributions, they're likely to be lower quality than later contributions of people working in the same work by the same people. So that's kind of how we think about subdividing these contributions to look for quality.
Okay, so let's start with the easy part of this. The bottom three: new contributors, one-off contributions, and then works to review. So we're going to dig into each one of these. So this is what happens if you click that recent contributors section. So what it shows you is a list of users who have contributed, transcribed for your project, but have never been reviewed. So they may have many, many pages. There's one here that has over 1,000. They may have only one. But we think that if you're going to spend time reviewing, especially in the earlier days of your project, or before you have a whole bunch of data, this is your best use of your time, because you want to catch people early in the process. You want to review their work, and then you want to gently correct them if you need to.
Right, and while this page looks intimidating because this is kind of sample data, we really think that if you look at this on like once a week basis, you're just going to see 2 or 3 people who came by who are brand new, where you can kind of jump in and encourage them, correct them, review their work, and get staff or reviewer eyes on those people early, so that you can ramp them up to your expectations, to your conventions, to your material.
Right. You get some of the same information in the overnight email, but not kind of this review-centric view.
Right. I mean, and the reason people show up here is because they've done work that no one has looked at yet, right? And once someone looks at it, they disappear from the list. So this list is intimidating looking now, but really it's going to be pretty short.
Okay, let's do the next one. So if you click, let's go back actually. So if you click on the review action to the left of the username here, you will end up at a page that looks like this, which is the recent contributions by someone who has never been reviewed.
Yeah, and this is all of everything that they've done that still needs reviews, right? This lets you see the comments. This is something that I don't remember whether it was Claire or Meredith who mentioned, was being able to see the discussions about a page are really important. And then clicking review drops you straight into reviewing that particular page. Once you finish that page, it moves you to the next one. So if I clicked on the first one and I approve those pages, I would just have to hit, next, approve to go through everything this person had done.
I will also point out that is this listed in order of time? I'm not sure. It should be. The first two doesn't look quite consistent, but
no, it is actually in order of date here.
Oh, in order of date. Great. So that kind of has that time dimension, in addition to being this is a new contributor. It's also, if you review them in the order that they worked, you can get to a point where you'll be like, they're good. They figured it out, or not.
Right.
Right. So, okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, and we also have this concept of one-off contributions, right? We internally we call these the drive-by transcribers. they're going to pop into your project. They will work on a single page. They may not finish that page, and then you'll never see them again. And because of that, their quality may be lower than others. Sometimes they'll end up at a page because they're doing a Google search or something, and they'll be like, oh, I'm actually interested in something that shows up on this page, or the person who's mentioned in this document. So sometimes they'll come in and actually provide value.
Yeah, I mean, lots of times they'll provide, you know, valuable notes on the page or things like that, but typically they're not familiar with the project. They're not familiar with the crowdsourcing task. They're not familiar with your instructions. These need special help. Now, that it's not as important to review the one-off contributors in a timely manner, right? Really, everything we're talking about here, except for the recent contributors, is something that can be done after a project is finished, after a project moves into another phase, right? But we wanted to isolate these one-off contributions to be able to drill into them, because we know that they're going to need a lot of work.
Right. And if they're not one-off contributions, because they come back and do a second page, then they move to the recent contributors.
Right, yes.
So, okay, let's do the next one. So this we kind of already have in the current review tab, which is just a list of the works and kind of a review-centric data about that work. So how many pages are in review, how many total pages are there, how many are incomplete, and who worked on it. Because sometimes one person will have worked on the entire document. And so you can figure out whether that's, you know, if you know that person, you know they're good enough. But sometimes you'll have, like this first one, you've got like 10 people, 9 people that worked on it. So, you know, just maybe I would review that one more, because then you have less of a sense of the quality. And you may not ever use this, because we're hoping that you will use the quality sampling instead.
Because it will be more useful.
Yes, but it's here if you need it. And it's an interesting kind of view into works.
Okay, so let's talk about quality sampling. So this is at least from our perspective, it is the bulk of the effort we've put into this feature. So this is designed to help you spot check contributions across those 2 dimensions of users and works, to be able to get information about the quality of those contributions and then make decisions about the next step based on that.
So let's start with what is a quality sampling anyway. So I actually pulled this from Wikipedia, and it's, you know, in general, a sample is a limited quantity of something which is intended to be similar to and represent a larger amount of that thing. So we use this a lot in medical science, right? You sample maybe a classroom full of kids to see if they have COVID, and based on what comes back, you decide whether you need to dig in and test everyone in that classroom. This actually happens in Austin ISD. So, so this idea that you can take a smaller set of things and you can review them, and based on that, they can represent larger groups of pages of transcriptions. So how does this work from your perspective? So we're going to ask you or your designated reviewers to review a certain number of pages. Think of it as a spot check. Then based on the results of those reviews, we determine the likelihood that a particular transcriber or a particular work results in lower quality transcription.
Or higher quality transcription.
Or higher quality transcription. We just make some determinations based on the input of the review process. And then we show that to you so that you can dig in on particular transcribers or works. So this is only going to be available for project owners if you're in an open review. So if anyone can review pages, the only people who can see quality sampling will be project owners. If you're in restricted review, where you have designated reviewers and only reviewers and project owners can actually approve pages, they'll be able to see it as well. Our basic philosophy is it's not cool to show a public kind of quality score for transcribers, right? That's something you need to be able to do this work, but we want to keep our transcribers motivated, so we're not going to score them publicly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
sorry.
So how many pages is enough? What does one of these samples look like? This was actually a really, really hard question to answer. So here's how we went about this. We took our friend Mark out for multiple lunches and had multiple meetings in order to figure this out. So Mark went to college with us, but then he went on to get a PhD in applied math, and he's worked as a data scientist for about 6 years. And he was really our secret weapon for figuring out a lot of the statistical and ways of approaching this type of work. So what Mark said was, and I have notes on this that helps me explain it, but that's okay. Mark said that, if you sample enough, if you look at enough data, and what you see here is a spreadsheet that has about 800 lines of data on it, and for every transcriber or for every work, you calculate the quality of that, of their getting to done, of all their contributions. At some point, if you average them 1 page, then 1 and 2 pages, and then 1, 2, and 3 pages, and you keep going, at some point that average stops really changing. So things kind of converge. So if you can figure out what that number is, where it doesn't matter if you do another page, because the number is going to be about the same, the quality from that person is going to be about the same. When you can figure out what that number is, then you can be done.
Right. So in other words, if a user has transcribed 100 pages, sampling a single page isn't going to tell you that much, right? You compare that page's quality with their average quality of the 100 pages, that's going to be pretty terrible. But if you look at the average of 2 of their pages, or the average of 3 of their pages, the average of 5 of their pages, you're getting a lot closer. So we spent about a week doing this kind of analysis across all of the CoSA projects, or all the projects that actually had been run with required review. And so we kind of empirically analyzed different sample sets to see where that point of diminishing returns was. And to our surprise, it turned out to be about 5 pages, right? At a sample set of 5, you've got a really good idea of how good this user is or how good this work is.
So once we knew we needed 5.
Right, we need to pick the pages for the sample, right? So we want to minimize the amount of effort that people doing the review have to put in to get this kind of data. So what we do is we look at the last editor of each page, and for each one of those users, we pull out 5 pages randomly from all their contributions, of which they were the last editor.
These are things that are in needs review. So let's sort of assume this is every page needs review in a project scenario.
Then we do the same thing per work, right? We pull out 5 random pages per work. These are, again, pages that need review. Since the 2 sets can overlap, we might end up pulling a page, every page was transcribed by a user and transcribed belongs to a work. Mm-hmm. We try to consolidate that as much as possible, so that if you review a page, it counts against the user's quality and it counts against the work's quality, to try to minimize the amount of effort to get this sampling while still having it be statistically valid. Yeah,
it's been about 2 decades since we have done that much set math, intersection and, yes. and overlaps and stuff. It was a fun algorithm to write.
So once we've got this sample set,
we have a list of pages. It's a list of pages, right?
Right. So how do we calculate the actual raw quality? So we look at the difference between the state of the page at the last edit, right? The last time a user edited it, and the state of the page when a reviewer finally hits approve. Yes, this is good, right? Because they can make changes, and hopefully they will make changes to fix problems. So we look at the number of characters that changed, and we look at any kind of transposition. We actually use an algorithm called Levenstein distance to look at the difference between the transcript the last time the user saved it and the transcript when the reviewer approved it. So we take that number of changes and we divide it by the total number of characters in the
That page's
in that page's
transcription.
transcription. That gets us a percentage, right? What we call the approval delta, the percentage of characters that changed.
So I'm going to walk you through this with a really, really simple example that's on the screen. So someone transcribed the quick brown fix jumped over the last bog. And then someone reviews it and is like, that's not right, and fixes it to the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. So if you look at the characters that changed, fix goes to fox, that's a 1 character change. Last goes to lazy, that's a 2 character change. Bog goes to dog, that's a 1 character change. So that's 4 characters that change as you fix this transcript, right? So you also count how many characters are in the original transcript, happens to be 36, I'm not gonna make you do that. And then you take the 4 characters that change, subtract them from your 36, so you get 32. You take 32 and you put it over your total characters, and that gives you a percentage that we are calling approval delta. So this one had an 89% approval delta. 89% of the characters, thumbs up. 11% of the characters, thumbs down.
So the quality score is this way of aggregating all of these corrections, corrected contributions per user or per work, right? So what we're looking at is, you look at, for a user or for a work, everything that's been reviewed, how much had to change, and then average those together, right? So then that gives us a quality score, and that a higher quality score is better. So the higher your quality, the fewer changes had to be made, the higher your quality score percentage is.
So yeah, keep going.
Yeah, okay.
This is
okay. So here's the thing. We don't want to assign a quality score to a user across all collection, because projects are different in a number of ways, right? Somebody who's working on the Missouri slave schedules may also be working on the World War I questionnaires, and those may be better at one than the other. But also because the number of characters in one of these versus the other may be very, very different. And so these numbers don't really carry from project to project, right? And so also internally within a project, what we want to do is look at users and works and their quality score in comparison to other quality scores within that project, right? So if you see here, we're basically taking all these users and taking their raw quality scores, and then for evaluation, we are ranking them by the number of corrections they needed, right? So we're essentially dividing them into almost a quintile. So you'll see anybody who has very low corrections, that's great. People who have very high corrections, they need a lot of intervention, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're really bad, right? If you only have a handful of users, you're going to see a spectrum with some that are very high, some that are very low, and maybe they're all great, right?
And you'll see even with this, I mean, they all have above 70 as their their quality score. So so we're trying to give you a sense of this 20% of people are worth looking at first. This 20% might be who you look at next. This 20% maybe you get to ignore because they're good enough for your purposes. You get to decide.
Right.
But we're just trying to lean you in the right direction.
So how does this work? If you go to the review dashboard and you click the quality sampling link, the very first time you do that, that tells you, okay, well, you can go ahead and start a sample. So when you start sampling, that is going to calculate the sample set from the collection, and then it's going to drop you straight into a review flow. And that review flow looks a lot like the transcription flow. It actually is the transcription flow, but it's got a few changes, right? You can go in, you can edit pages, you can edit transcripts, you can hit save, you can preview. But when you approve, this is going to take you to the next page in the set that needs review, right? So the idea is we've got this randomized set and we are reviewing pages, and we're just going to do it in this linear page after page after page manner. So
But
you
you
don't,
don't really know what order you're getting your pages in. They're not related to each other. They're not really in.
because they're randomized, right? We're trying to
randomized.
make this statistically valid.
Mhm.
One of the other ways we're trying to make this, try to eliminate potential bias is that we're not showing the versions. We're not giving you or anyone reviewing this the ability to see whose work you're reviewing, right? We want to anonymize that as much as possible, so you don't say, oh, well, this person's great, I'm not gonna bother checking over their stuff. You know, so we're trying to eliminate bias from the system. So again, this flow lets you approve, and it takes you, if I hit approve, it would take me to page 3 and I could just keep going.
You could also, though, if you don't want to do all 455 pages in one sitting, you can do whatever you have time for, and you can go back to the quality sampling itself. You don't have to finish the entire sample before we start populating data for you to look at.
And we'll mention this in the next screen, but you can also delegate this approval work to other people, to reviewers.
Which they'll see it in their review tab, but there's some kind of shortcuts to help them get there.
Right. So
Show them the
this
shortcut.
this is kind of the result of doing a partial set of reviews. So this is the quality sampling dashboard that'll be visible to you and authorized reviewers, but this also has a review URL that is something you can give to volunteers and say, hey, we need these pages reviewed. That takes them through that approval workflow without showing them this screen or any of the other things that expose quality scores or user data.
Or also just confuses them because they're not sure what to do next, right? Make sure if you're sending this to people that they're able to review within your collection.
Right.
So either project owner, staff member, or an authorized reviewer.
So let's talk about this screen. This is the quality sampling dashboard that shows you for users, and you know, if this were in a screenshot, I could scroll down, you'd see a separate listing per work. All of the users, for each user, we see all the pages that they have worked on, all the pages on which they were the last editor, the pages that may remain to be reviewed, a quality score, and then the relative corrections, right? So that is that kind of quartile of, oh, this person has an average number of corrections, this person had a very low number of corrections. And then the actions button lets you drop into the review screen for that user, which is identical to the one that Sarah showed before, where you get to see everything that user has done. So the idea is that even if you don't want to do a full spot check, you can use this to see for all the users what work they've done. You might be able to assign specific users to staff members to review their work.
You can see, you know, their patterns, right? We've also talked about adding to this screen, and we haven't done it yet. And this is one of the pieces of feedback we'd really love to have from you, an approve all button, where maybe you know Heidi Marie and know that her quality is fine, and you can just come in here and click, you know, approve all and be done. Or maybe you look at her first 2 pages and they're fine. You're like, there's nothing that needs to change here, and you're like, I don't need to review the next 3. So you could come back to this screen and hit approve all. So that it's a shortcut, right? And it has some problems when you think about the work dimension, because maybe Heidi Marie is awesome on easy to read documents, but there's 1 or 2 documents in here, and maybe you can see it because you know it, but maybe not, that you actually do need to review. And if you hit approve all, you will not have that opportunity, because that page will be reviewed and it will not show up in any of these flows. So that's one of our open questions that we're still trying to figure out.
So let's talk about how to use this. So we have to do a lot of retrospective calculations to figure out the last editor and the approval deltas for projects that already exist, right? I mean, moving forward, we calculate that automatically. So if you were to launch a project, you know, next week or next month or something, you wouldn't need to talk to us, but we need to do a data migration for
existing projects.
And it takes a long time. So we'd love for you to test it out and try it out. But to do that, please let us know which project you want to do. So send us an email saying, hey, I want to try this out on this project. We'll run the data migration.
And then we'll email you back and say, okay, now it's ready.
Right. Yeah. Right. So
That's the end.
that is the end of our formal presentation, and we want to stop sharing so we can turn this over for discussion.
We can reshare and kind of bring up some of those views and talk about them and through them and stuff. So
this may be a lot to chew on, but we'd love to know what you think.
This may be kind of,
Excuse me.
you can go ahead, sorry.
Mine was just a very simple question. It looked like it was kind of random as far as when you had the list of contributors and then the number, I guess, of errors that were being made. If those could be put in numerical order, so you go from maybe the worst people so that you know to concentrate on them rather than the people who just one or two errors, you know, it's going to happen. But someone, for instance, we had the one guy a student who came in with his special algorithm and basically, you know, filled in all of the blanks.
That's right.
Oh, yes, yes. So he did 16,000 certificates. And if we had been able to see that, you know, it wasn't reading handwriting, it was putting things in the wrong place. If we'd seen that, you know, the minute he started, might have been only 15,000. So, so that would be helpful, is all I'm saying, is just to see who's really messing it up.
I'm going to write that down, but making that list sortable.
Oh yeah, that sounds good, because then you can sort it however you want. So Ben and I had this discussion about an hour ago. I'm like, we really need to sort that list in the order of quality, and it has an order in it.
Right. We try to make that list the same order, more or less, that you review pages in. But you're right. What you're describing is more important. All right. Now let me write that down. That is a great idea.
We're just glad we could provide you with such a wonderful example. So.
That one was a pretty terrible example.
One was, I don't know if the rest of the crowd knows about this, but there was some researcher who
no, I think he was like an undergraduate student, sort of, maybe a graduate student.
High school
student.
Yeah.
A very smart high school student.
He was, but you know, hi, you know, just want to let you know I've been working in your project for a couple of weeks. Let me, you know, using this fabulous thing that I created. Let me know how it's going, he said. So I checked.
So he wrote some script that would look at the images and do OCR on the images of the marriage certificates, and then fill in the form from the page and post it. And of course, it's OCR, so there were loads of errors. And he plowed through 16,000 pages in what, 24 hours or something?
It was like a week. We just didn't catch it early enough. Yeah. No, it was bad, but.
So one good thing, quite frankly, and I think this goes towards you know, using our transcribers as reviewers, they kind of keep an eye on, you know, what other people are doing. And sometimes I have to say, oh, well, you really don't need to, you know, send them emails telling them where they're screwing up, you know, let me do that.
Yeah, that is always tough. We often tell people what John and Christina do, which is if you need to correct a single transcriber, send out an email that as if it was going to everyone. We love that trick. We think it's a great one.
Yeah. To all.
Yes.
A generic sniper. We will both create that term right now.
That's great.
Yeah. So I would agree though with her comment in the fact that one of our biggest problems is those people, and I didn't realize that it was 5, but they burn in an error very early and they're rabbits, so they go really fast.
Yes.
16,000 is well beyond what we've experienced, but still, that is a really, really good point that we need to be able to rein in those people. So not only should I say they have a bad score, but is there a way that we could somehow formulate, these people have done a lot in a short period of time and have never been reviewed before?
So here's my thought on that,
Okay.
which is, so we've got this recent contributors list, which is designed to show you that. But what I think based on this we ought to do is we ought to include that in the nightly emails that y'all get and say, hey, here's these brand new unreviewed people who have started working on this, or here's the list of people who have not been reviewed, or here's how many of these people, here's a link to go look at them, so that you get notified of.
Well, and I think
this.
there's another, so this, when we were putting this presentation together and we're like, okay, your quality dimensions are user, work, and time. And we have, we have those recent contributors for time, but what are the other ways that you can use this time concept to highlight quality issues, right? So one is when you click through to look at an individual transcriber, if we show you their contributions, least recent at the top to most recent. So the first step they did is the top of the list, which we do. Then perhaps as you go through, or maybe you sample the first one, the fifth one, and then the 10th one, and you see if if they continue to make the same mistake, or if they self-correct and stop making that mistake, like thinking about time that way as well. But what John basically just brought up is there's a time component to how much have you done in a very short period of time, because that's also something that is potentially flaggable. And I don't know, so that's kind of like a one-off transcriber. It isn't, but it could go in the UI, it could go there, like very active recent transcribers or something. I mean, I don't know exactly, but something like that.
If they would just sort by, this is a new just transcriber, and the people with the highest number of transcriptions go to the top in that page.
We could totally do that. That's
Yes,
easy. Yeah.
That way you've got recent and you've got the possible highest problems at the top.
Yeah.
Sort by, find your rabbits by sorting by contributions.
Okay, that's.
And then if you need to do the generic sniper email to them, then you do that as quickly as possible. So that they don't get the burn in, because if it's after 5 entries, that's kind of scary.
I don't necessarily, do we know that that's burn in, or that's
They develop habits,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've done it.
yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the next topic. But
Yeah.
Sonia, I thought you.
Oh, I was going to ask an even more basic question than these. These were great, but my question was, how are guest transcribers handled? People like even the drive-by transcribers you showed had accounts for people that don't even have their own accounts. How do we identify those?
I think they show up. So we give every guest transcriber an internal ID. If they sign up for an account within that session, that web session, then we move their work to their actual formal account. If they never create a formal account, I think it shows up like
Guest 50317 or something like that.
Okay, was that maybe one of those numbered accounts that was on the screen? Okay.
Some of those are.
Yeah, well, one of the 24557 is Tom York, who I don't know why he's chosen 24557, but
That's his display name. It's yes.
I don't really understand it, but we're not arguing. He's 83.
And
He can do what he wants.
he does tremendous quantities of work. So
Other comments or questions or suggestions? These are fantastic.
or other, if you want us to go back and show you any of the screenshots to kind of.
So what is the possibility on the table view of only scoring certain fields? Like, for instance, with the Missouri slave schedules, we really mainly admin the names. If somebody mistyped an age or whatever that it might be, when we were doing the quality control on those, we really didn't. I mean, we looked to make sure that there was an entry in there, but we didn't check to see if male and female was correct, age was correct, mulatto or black was correct. We're making the assumption that if that is wrong, people will discover it let us know that it's wrong,
Right.
and then we can fix that on the back end. If you can't find the name, you're not going to find the name.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think I have my opinion. You can see if your opinion changes.
Okay, yeah.
So my opinion is that is something you control at the review phase. So you tell your reviewers, or if you are the reviewers, this is the only stuff we're going to bother correcting, the names. Everything else, just make sure it's filled in and only correct it if it's not filled in. And that will then this is part of why we have this concept of all these quality scores are unique to a collection,
And they're relative within that collection. So
Right.
long as your reviewers are doing this consistently, you're good. Where the problem might come in is if you have 3 reviewers that are doing exactly what you asked and only reviewing names, and you have a 4th that is a perfectionist and reviews absolutely everything, right? If they are working through one user's stuff or one work,
or even if they're just working through the sample.
right, then all of that material is going to get a worse approval delta than what
maybe.
your other reviewers are doing, because they're going to be changing things in other fields.
Except I don't know that it matters that much statistically. So here's the deal. If that very perfectionist reviewer is working through your sample, then theoretically they will be given a randomized list of pages and they will be applying their perfectionist view of things to the randomized list in such a way that it gets spread out over everybody.
But everything they touch is going to look horrible.
Yes, I know, but it's going to be fairly horrible across all the users. So therefore, it doesn't matter that much. I mean,
I'm not sure, but let's, yeah.
So it's the reverse of a curve.
yes,
Review-
reverse of a curve.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, but that could be a problem.
it could be a problem, but I mean,
You don't think it's a big one?
I don't think it's a big one for about 3 different reasons. So
Okay.
one is, what's the chances? I mean, I guess you might have a reviewer who does not listen to what you ask them to do and is a perfectionist. So that's the first thing that has to happen, is that you've got one reviewer who's doing, a harder job than the others. Your second thing is, what are the chances that someone who messes up one of those less important fields has not also messed up a name? So that's, the other kind of piece of it. And then the third one is, what are the chances that your perfectionist reviewer is not spread evenly across your sample, which try to avoid that.
It's beyond this context, but this is the reason why that Family Search went away from reviewers, is because they had perfectionists and people that were completely blind doing the reviews.
Mhm.
And so their delta was somewhere down at Omicron. So, I mean, it was not good. And so they just completely abandoned review because the quality was so bad on review.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, but they had tens of thousands of people reviewing with 0 controls in place. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've never done this before, right? You guys have been, the reviewer role is pretty recent, even, and from the page, right? That's within the last 6 months. You are all going to have to feed this back to us to tell us if it's going to work or not.
Right. I mean, because we're arguing hypotheticals here in this case, and maybe you'll run into this and we'll say, wow, this is terrible. We've got to change this and do it this other way. Or maybe this isn't a problem, but there's some other thing that's a big problem that we only discover by looking at the data and looking at the workflow. But we are definitely planning on coming back and revisiting this based on whatever it is you find.
Can we go back for a minute to the concept about, these scores not carrying across collections? And I understand the reason for that, because certainly we have some collections that are much more challenging than others, and they might have a low score on one and a high score on another. But I'm just wondering what would be the best way to keep track of volunteers, because I find myself using that summary tab a lot. Now that you all show me where it is, I use that summary tab a lot to keep track of like who's coming in, how much time they're doing, just sort of getting a good overview of what's happening with our volunteers. So I do feel like there is maybe a case for having some sort of whether it's a score or something that is just like red flagging your rabbits or whatever it may be, some sort of thing there. That's just the area that I find myself using. Maybe this review will take that place as the place where I check on volunteer activity, but I don't know if others have other ideas.
Yeah, I think there's some value to scoring transcribers. I think what we can't do is score them at a give them a percentage score, because every collection will be different, and some of, and if you've always worked on really easy stuff, somebody else has always worked on really hard stuff, you're not apples to apples there. But once you put somebody into one of 5 quintiles based on your score, you could use that. You could give someone a 1 to 5 sort of score, or an average of 1 to 5 on every collection
Across all
they've
their
contributed
projects.
to. And we probably wouldn't even show you a number, but we'd show you a color or something, that this is a green transcriber versus a red transcriber. That could work. I mean, I think that would be a way to kind of there's a word for making things even across all collections. Normalize. Yeah.
Would it make sense even, I mean, one of the challenges with going across collections is you're also potentially going across institutions,
I
right?
think you would do that
So
too.
Tom York comes in and starts working on some Virginia material, and does he carry his score?
Yes.
Do you trust his score from Indiana? Maybe you do. I mean,
I would.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's pretty fantastic, but we know volunteers go across projects and across institutions.
So think of a back of a baseball card. You've got RBIs and stolen bases and all kinds of other things. And what you're essentially saying is that there are different metrics. Can we get each of those metrics captured by project? And I don't even know by volume. I think project is the level that makes the most sense to us. I mean, if it's tax books, then that makes sense to get a score for them in tax books, even if they work on 15 or 20 different volumes. But I do think it's useful to be able long-term to compare the slave schedules to the tax books to 15 other projects. And you might be able to figure out, like you were talking earlier, that this volunteer is really good at these projects and they're abysmal at these projects. And then you may even steer them, if they're a high productivity one, steer them to the tax books because they do fabulous with those, and just keep giving them tax books.
Yes.
Because in the end, this is really important, because our staff time adminning this stuff is pretty significant.
Would it be possible once a collection's done to be able to export the statistics on the volunteers who worked on a particular collection? We do that with our death certificates, and we keep them year to year so we can kind of evaluate it, because once the previous year's deleted out, we don't have that information. And I feel like that's the same as we delete collections from the page. Will that data on those volunteers anyway just go away?
That's fascinating. This actually ties into what Sonia was talking about, and it makes the idea of that summary tab has this export screen where you pull out information per volunteer.
Or maybe just on the collection. I would put it on the export tab on the collection, but we'll figure it out. Yeah.
But we might be able to display that there, those quality metrics.
Yeah, I think you and I have to have some long discussions about where it makes the most sense. Yeah, I understand what you're asking, Christina, and I think it's a good idea. I think it raises a problem that we have been kicking down the road for way too long, which is when you delete collections, we lose way too many statistics. Meredith's nodding because she's like, yes, I know this is a problem, and yes. So, because ideally, you can delete your collection and we don't lose those statistics. That would be ideal, right? Is that a user has some of this data already associated with them, and unless they deleted their account or something, we wouldn't lose it. So I don't know. Yeah.
So on tangent, why does Christina have a lower score than me? Hopefully that was just dummy.
It was dummy data. I was just entering stuff, and I was like, how am I going to explain this whole quintile thing? I was like, I'm going to do a spreadsheet.
In what world that exists, I'm not surprised that I was at the bottom, but Christina would.
Claire, Meredith, any comments and suggestions?
No, I think it sounds great.
Yeah, I like the look of it. Everything we had, I know we talked a while back, but I think this looks good and it's logical and everything's laid out really well. So I'm impressed.
Thank you. It's a lot of work.
So if it's a non-staff member, can you anonymize that's doing the review? Can you anonymize the users over in the left column on that review page?
So what we envision for non-staff members, and this is something that we need to talk through with y'all, is that they don't see that review dashboard that lists users. They just get the, I'm going to approve this and it takes me to the next page. I'm going to approve this and it takes me to the next page. Right? I can imagine a scenario in which you say, well, I want you to run review for all these people. I'm going to give you the approve all button, but I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, this is like, we haven't.
I mean, we designed this feature
yeah.
that lets you hand reviewers this kind of sandbox thing that lets them do all the sampling.
But then but then who does comes back to the dashboard and then makes decisions based on this? Like, I feel like there's someone can review, but then there's kind of this Uber reviewer who can make decisions based on the results of that review. And whether, I mean, currently anyone who can review can see that and can see all the user IDs. And if we had an approve all button, would be able to hit the approve all button, but we don't have one, so, not a problem yet.
Well, this
I don't
actually,
know that we need that. Do we need the names to do random sampling?
Okay, so you don't see the names when you're doing the sampling reviews. You
Okay.
only see the names after the results from some of the sampling at least have come in, and you have
Okay.
that dashboard. Now I think you need the names because we know from what you all do that you know the people, right?
Right.
And you're like, mhm,
right.
Tom York, he's good.
No.
Other people maybe not.
One of the things that Sarah and I discussed was possibly pseudonymizing the names for people who aren't project owners. So share everything with potential reviewers who might be volunteers you promoted, right? But for people who are not project owners, instead of seeing Tom York or whatever he set his username to today, you'd see the same kind of thing like you do in Google Docs, anonymous gecko or anonymous quokka or something like that, and have that be consistent, not totally random, right? But every time anonymous quokka shows up,
It's the same user.
it's the same user, right? And the volunteers don't know that's Tom York, but you would see Tom York. That might be a different way to kind of preserve the volunteer morale aspect of things while sharing things with the volunteers. I mean, it's so tricky because we don't want to tell people they're doing terrible jobs and turn them off forever.
Well, but there's also, you don't necessarily want your reviewers to tell people that your volunteer reviewers to tell other people they're doing terrible jobs.
Yeah, the DM aspect of this is direct messaging is what concerns me the most. Yeah.
Can we talk about approve all? Like, we don't have an approve all button. How many of you would like one, right? If you,
I know Liz doesn't want one at all. That makes sense.
I don't know that we would use it. Like, I think because the risk is too high, because people, especially if it's across the collection, as a whole, instead of just within a work, because like our county tax lists, how they're structured, not necessarily how they're structured, but the content and how easy they are to read is going to vary county by county because they're handwritten, and some county clerks do a better job than others at making things readable or things like that. So someone's quality in one county versus another, even year to year, might vary drastically. So I just don't see it being
something you'd use. Yeah.
So would we use it, Christina, would we use it in a specific volume for a specific user?
I mean, possibly, like if we reviewed, say, Tom Waters like 10 times, then we know he's really good. Like, he's been volunteering and indexing stuff for a decade for us. We probably would be willing to approve all of his once we made sure that he was like understood the rules within that particular work. But
And then like for something like our one big project that we talk about all the time was so massive, but they were fairly simple and consistent, the cards. So yes, I could see I've got a user who's done 2,000 cards and she knows what she's doing, and I don't want to have to go through individually and approve all of those. So sometimes, yeah, and like the project we have going on right now, the 1875 voter registration books, it's not just varying from work to work. Within a work, there are different registrars. So in that case, yes, we would need to look more closely. But when a collection is more uniform, even across works, I could see that being very useful, especially since those tend to be larger anyway. So I see the downfalls, but I also see the advantages of having it as an option, even if it's something you said administratively. This collection will allow approval, of reviews or something.
Maybe we don't, I mean. there's
Maybe
other
it's only,
possibility-
if we create it, it's only visible to
only
project
visible to
owners.
project
and
owners,
nobody-
then you guys can choose or not choose, yeah. And, I'm curious too, like, it seems to me like you can decide you're done without actually reviewing everything, right? And be like, okay, we did the worst 40% of both the users and the works, and that means we got most of it, right? I don't know. Why does it totally depends on how important the quality is for the particular project you're working on.
Is there an easy way to define somebody as a super user?
We would just say, are they a project owner or not?
So
Okay.
you can, if it's a required review project, you can add reviewers, which can be anyone in from the page, so a volunteer or a staff member. If you don't add reviewers, then the only people who can do this type of review are the project owner or anyone else who's been added as a project owner, which we kind of think of as staff.
So is there a way to where that you could just review blank pages or pages that have, and this again is the tabular one, pages where you're expecting data in a field and that field is blank?
That's a neat idea.
I think what you're looking for is a lot closer to a data explorer that would let you slice and dice the tabular data and look for anomalies. And that's not something this was designed for. It's something that I feel like has a lot of potential. I get kind of keen about the idea whenever it comes out.
Humongous and scary. We talked, I mean, as we've been talking through this, I actually think when we talked to Claire, we came to sort of the same, do you want a data explorer? And really the answer is go export all your data and pull it into a spreadsheet and explore it there. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing right now on the slave schedule, so.
Yeah. But I'm trying to put that work to the volunteers. If you've got a volunteer who could go in and confirm that all those nulls are truly nulls.
Yeah.
And
That's fair.
yeah.
Well, so does your export have a link back to the individual page? I'm trying to remember because I haven't looked at our
Sure.
exports.
It does. We usually, one of the first things we do is delete that. And if we don't need, we go through and the very first thing we do is put it in the field order we need for it to go into our database. So we delete all of that, and we keep, the only one we don't delete is like the page notes, because we use that to review. We don't delete that till the end. But
y'all, we are just over time. Sarah and I are happy staying on for the next 20 minutes at least, but let me just, in case
If you
people
need
need
to
to drop
go, you
off,
can go.
let me thank you all for being here and working with us on this project. This has really been fantastic. And Sonia asks if any of us are going to BPE in Nashville.
In September. I actually was thinking maybe we should present this.
Yeah, maybe we should present it. Maybe you should submit something for this, and I should submit something for my analysis of the Missouri the death certificates. That's something that.
Yeah, maybe we can email about this after the fact. We were thinking about submitting something related to those spreadsheet style collections we're doing, and sort of how that's going. So we'll see how that comes together. But yeah, if anyone's going, I'd love to see you in person, or maybe if we have a few from the page sessions, we can kind of like group them or something. I don't know.
With it being an unconference too, you're only doing about a 10-minute pitch. So several of us being in the room would really broaden the discussion a lot. And so I don't know how many people have been to BPE in the past, but there's some really good technology discussions that have happened in those rooms over the years.
Awesome. So the other thing I wanted to mention, this is not directly related to this feature, but it's very related to the spreadsheet feature. And this problem that Christina, I know you highlighted, I know North Carolina has highlighted, which is we have pages that are not done and it's really hard to find them and get to them and transcribe them. So we have a fix for that. It's not passing tests yet, and we were working really hard to get this feature done. So we hear you, we know it's a big problem, and we are working on it, and we will get it out as soon as we can, but it's not there yet. I'm sorry.
That will actually alleviate some of the null questions that I was referring to too, because it's the whole page of nulls that are the biggest problem.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Oh, sorry, Sonia. Yes.
Just to clarify, our follow-up task from today is to identify a collection that we want to use this review feature on. Is that?
Yeah, if you have one,
if you have one,
that would be great.
Okay.
So you're just a curiosity. Your 5 metrics you came up with. I've always thought that you have to do 50 or 100 to actually get to where you're at a good pace. So you're not finding that it was in that metric. Are you finding that people are staying the same but getting faster?
So we're not actually trying to find, we're not looking in a linear way. What we're trying to do is say somebody's contributed 100 things, right? And some of the stuff they've done is terrible. And some of the stuff they've done is great. If you average it out, you get a score for them that's
in the middle,
right? In the middle, right? And so what our sampling was designed to do was to figure out what is the minimal random sample that you can take that gets you that in the middle
answer.
That's the same as their average, that's close to what their average is. Because if you take just one thing, you're going to get a great one, or you're going to get a terrible one. If you take just 2, well,
you'll get closer, maybe, but
you might
maybe
get
not.
closer, you might not, right? And so what we found was that there was a breakdown around, for some collections it was 4, for some it was 5, for some it was a little closer to 6, but there was that was where we saw, for the most cases, yes, this represents the same number as their average.
But it has nothing to do, because what you're thinking is when they have done X many pages, then they're going to start being consistent. And that's not what we're looking for. They might be getting consistent, but but if we take, if we're sampling from across their 100 pages, they're not going to have the same quality score across the sample that we're grabbing of those 5 pages.
So I guess what I'm thinking of here is, let's say you're on a manufacturing line. The first 5 times you put that bolt or rivet in, if you do it 100% accurate every time, you're still going to be slow. And so when you're doing your sampling, if I've done 100 now, is it pulling 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 at the sample, or is it pulling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It's not pulling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is pulling something more equivalent to 20, 40, 60, 80.
Except it's randomized.
Yeah, so it's,
I get that.
Yeah.
13, 17, 87.
Randomize random numbers between 1 and 100. So,
Right.
Yes.
So,
Will their quality score remain just based on the ones you identified in the sample, or if you end up reviewing more of their pages, will it adjust?
As you review more of their pages, then it will adjust.
Okay.
Right, so it keeps going, it keeps improving over time.
Yeah. The sample actually gets bigger, even if you're reviewing stuff that's outside of the sample.
Right, as you
part of
add
the
new
sample.
works, as you have new users, then that sample gets, the sample set size gets bigger. So
But also as you review pages for an individual user that's outside of the sample set.
that doesn't actually increase the sample, it just increases the accuracy of their quality score.
Okay.
Yeah.
it sounds like y'all had a lot of fun doing this because you know all the different paths.
Yes. Yeah, we had to rewrite how we calculated the sample set twice.
Maybe more, but yeah.
Yeah.
We learn stuff every time, but
It's pretty intense. So, all right. Well, we look forward to hearing from you. And, as always, send us email or anything like that. Thank you for your support.
always thank you
Yeah.
so much for your support.
Thank
And
you.
we will also incorporate a lot of these suggestions into the features. We've got more work to do to get the sortable things and get all that in place. Those are some great suggestions. So thanks again, and thanks Meredith for putting this all together.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.